Oof, I spoke about so many books. How did I manage to do that? Here. Where are they? All of these. Hi everyone, this is Amreen and welcome to Read a Day Club. Today I'm going to be talking about quite a few books. Now I don't exactly remember when I read these, so I'll be following no specific order as such, but what I do remember is how each book made me feel. Right, so first we'll begin with Azhar Nafisi's reading Lolita in Tehran. Reality has become so intolerable, she said, so bleak that all I can paint now are the colors of my dreams. I clearly remember reading this line because it struck such a personal chord with me. Reality has become so intolerable that all I can paint now are the colors of my dreams. These are the words spoken by one of Nafisi's students from her secret private group sessions that she held in her own home, where a bunch of girls that she selected from when she was a professor at the university. So they would all gather to discuss literature, forbidden literature in the city of Tehran, and this was during the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Now, in this book, Nafisi has talked about life, or rather lives, lived under a tragic, cruel, and totalitarian regime, and she refers to it as an illusory world full of false promises, where you can no longer differentiate between your savior and your executioner. The book is divided into 4 parts, which are the 4 authors that Nafisi and her group of students discuss. So you have Nabokov's Lolita, Fitzgerald's Gatsby, Henry James, and then Jane Austen. Basically, Nafisi has somehow tied the unabashed, crude, whimsical, and downright honest character of these extraordinary pieces of literature, all of them fictional classic novels. So she somehow connected their essence with the reality faced and lived by not just her, but even her students, basically all women living in Iran at the time. About Nabokov's Lolita. Now, if you've read Lolita, you know that the book was written from Humbert's perspective, the male protagonist. And in this book, reading Lolita in Tehran, you get to view the same story from Lolita's perspective, the female protagonist. Then she moves on to The Great Gatsby by Fitzgerald. She describes her experience of discussing this book in class when she was a professor who had just moved to Iran from the States. So she taught at the University of Tehran as a literature professor. So on her very first day in class, she asks her students what they think about reading fiction works like The Great Gatsby, which turned out to be a very controversial, highly debatable topic in her class because of the amoral character of Gatsby, Daisy, and Tom Buchanan, and even Nick, as a matter of fact. But she tells her students that such great works of imaginative literature are supposed to unnerve you a little bit, only so that your perception of the world shifts and undergoes a change that makes you question everything about life, traditions, expectations, ambition, love, and things like that. One of the most radical students in her class, who's also a devoted advocate of the whole Islamic Revolution in Iran, says, the one good thing about this book being The Great Gatsby, he said, waving the culprit in one hand, is that it exposes the immorality and decadence of American society. But we have fought to rid ourselves of this trash, and it is high time that such books be banned. He kept calling Gatsby this Mr. Gatsby and could not bring himself to name Daisy, whom he referred to as that woman. According to Niazi, there was not a single virtuous woman in the whole novel. What kind of model are we setting for our innocent and modest sisters? He asked his captive audience by giving them such a book to read. Gatsby is dishonest. He earns his money by illegal means and tries to buy the love of a married woman. This book is supposed to be about the American dream, but what sort of a dream is this? Does the author mean to suggest that we should all be adulterers and bandits? Then there is Fitzgerald's own explanation of the true meaning of the novel that's mentioned in this book. He says that characters like Gatsby are a mere reflection of all the illusions we foster in our own lives, and the extent to which we will go in order to keep our dreamlike, magical delusions from shattering into a million pieces. about Henry James, Azhar Nafisi calls on James's works, especially his characters, as a response to being forced to wear a headscarf, to not wear any makeup, basically not show or do anything. And this includes women not being allowed to even have ice cream outside, as a matter of fact, since that could be perceived as attracting the male gaze. So as a response to going from living in a more progressive liberal Iran to a more conservative one ruled by radical doctrines. Nafisi talks about Henry James's protagonists. She remarks that in his books most of them end up unhappy, but that unhappiness doesn't take the form of loss or failure. On the contrary, Henry James gives them all this elevated sense of integrity, victory, and self-respect that has more to do with your inward self. And finally, there is Jane Austen that Nafisi talks about. She has used Austen's Pride and Prejudice to sort of explain how well Austen's novels and the characters within these novels, how they're in constant dialogue with one another, both internal dialogue and dialogue through letters. So she calls Austen's multivocality, this presence of diverse voices and opinions, a democratic structure where you feel that you have the necessary space for introspection as well as for self-criticism. Okay, then we have The Gate by Natsume Soseki, my very first, by this great Japanese novelist. Very quickly, it's about a husband and wife, Sosuke and Oyoni, living a very quiet life. So they keep to themselves and they don't bother much with the world. It's actually a very simple story, yet very, very moving at the same time. It's a story where nothing happens because so much has already happened in the past, and the word shadow has been used to refer to this past, right? So and that explains their resigned mode of existence in the present moment. Now I could not help but relate to that because certain books, I feel they just remind you of how much baggage you carry and just the weight of all that luggage you've been hauling around, and how it can feel so overwhelming at times. And then you read about characters like Sosuke and Oyoni, and even the relationship that they share with each other, and it all somehow starts to feel very light. It somehow starts to make sense, and I feel like as soon as you visualize in the form of words, in this case, as soon as you visualize what you've been through in the past, so that sort of relatability with such fictional characters, it can make you feel very comforted in your own life, in your own present moment. This book brought me a lot closer to being okay with nothing happening, as in certain things are not under my control, and because of that nothing happens. And characters like Sosuke and Oyoni take away the hurt from that void. The void still exists because I guess that's a part of life, but then it loses its hold over you. That's what I'm really trying to say. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of joy and beauty in this novel as well. Joy, it's a sort of joy that you feel knowing that life is going to go on no matter what you feel about it, so you might as well just keep on walking. And then there's the beauty of solitary existence as well. Yeah, so that was The Gate by Natsume Soseki. A light read maybe, but a melancholic read for sure. And it's actually one of the very few NYRB editions that I own. Very few because they're just so expensive. And basically what I'm trying to say is that you should be sending me one of these. Just kidding. No, I'm not. So anyway, moving on. Next we have The Idiot by Dostoevsky. Now I'm deliberately going to try and keep this one short because if you follow me on Instagram, then you probably know how obsessed I am with Dostoevsky's novels. And again, sorry for the construction noise. It's never ending in my building. Okay, so there are many themes in here that I'd like to talk about, like we have we have vulnerable, sensitive, familial relationships, and then we get to understand how self-absorbed and narcissistic some of the characters can be. And then there's a lot of importance given to secondary characters as well, which is something that I found very, very interesting, because you get to gauge the plot and rhythm of the novel through different lenses rather than following just one perspective of the protagonist. And reading The Idiot or any of Dostoevsky's novels, as a matter of fact, it's always such an eye-opening experience for me, because he makes you view the world and life and human behavior, actions, emotions. He makes you view all of this in contrary to what you actually believe. The Idiot is, the novel is more than just a love triangle between Prince Mishkin, who is our protagonist, and Nastasia, and who is the third character? Prince Mishkin. Okay, we've mentioned Nastasia here, but I don't remember the name of the third character. Okay, so it's more than just the love triangle. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to say about The Idiot by Dostoevsky. Better late than never. And I am saying this because I read this book, The Age of Reason by Jean-Paul Sartre. I read this book months ago. Okay, so it's about a French philosophy professor whose life seems to be stuck between his ideals of freedom and trying to figure out how to arrange for an abortion. He gets his mistress pregnant. I don't know why that's funny, okay? All right, so from the beginning of the story, you see this, hold on. From the beginning of the story, you see this stark black and white contrast between ideals and what reality actually looks like. And honestly speaking, I enjoyed reading this novel because of the protagonist. His name is Matthew Delarue, right? So he very conveniently compartmentalizes these two extremes in order to fit his narrative. Now, in the novel, almost all male characters are interpreting and reacting to the threat of the Second World War in their own way. And almost every character, both male and female, they all seem to be trapped within themselves, both consciously and at a subconscious level. Just for that, I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. I've already marked it. So our protagonist says, "You think I'm lying to myself?" And his mistress replies, "No, anyway, one can't ever know, but I don't think so. Still, do you know what I do believe? That you're beginning to sterilize yourself a little. I thought that today. Everything is so neat and tidy in your mind. It smells of clean linen. It's as though you had just come out of a drawing cupboard. But there's a want of shade. There's nothing useless, nor hesitant, nor underhand about you now. It's all high noon. And don't say this is all for my benefit. You're moving down your own incline. You've acquired the taste for self-analysis." Then he says, "I'm not so much interested in myself as all that," he said simply. She replies, her name is Marcel. She replies saying, "I know, it isn't an aim, it's a means. It helps you to get rid of yourself, to contemplate and criticize yourself. That's the attitude you prefer. When you look at yourself, you imagine you aren't what you see. You imagine you are nothing. That is your ideal, that you want to be nothing." So yeah, there's a lot of that in the book. And there's also a lot of talk about suffering and poverty. Okay, I have marked another excerpt. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. In that world, suffering was not a condition of the soul, and words were not needed to explain it. It was an aspect of things. All right. The next one I'd like to talk about is Beloved by Toni Morrison. Nothing I'm going to say about Toni Morrison's Beloved will do justice to the pain and suffering that is a part of this novel. I've read Morrison's The Bluest Eye as well, and I can say for certain that her style of prose is just something I've never come across. In this novel, she talks about the life of a woman, a mother, a wife, a daughter, all of them being just one person, writing about serious issues like slavery, motherhood, manhood, and also other equally important aspects of life, such as the grip of hope on life, the authority of what has passed but continues to haunt the present, the cruel ways of the world, the need for help and love, and so much more. Okay, so now we have Middlemarch. Where do I begin with this 800 something page novel? Now, I DNF'd this, guilty as charged, but not because the book was uninteresting, bland, or anything of the sort. It's just that my reading sessions were too wide apart, like they were too spread out. So because of the inconsistency in my reading, I decided to pick this one up at another time. And even though I had only 100 pages left to finish the book, I just feel that this book deserves my full undivided attention, right? And I didn't give it that. So yeah, I think it deserves a lot better. So anyway, based on whatever I've read, which was a huge chunk, the novel is written very remarkably by Mary Ann Evans, also known as George Eliot. It's about so many things: youthful idealism, rigid social standards. Middlemarch is above all about change and the way individuals and groups adapt to or resist change in their marriages, in their professions, family life, social intercourse. The characters of the novel are shown responding in their various ways to events, both public and private. George Eliot's method of controlling the variety of her themes and characters is to have her large-minded narrator explore in a spirit of criticism, but also of understanding and sympathy, the consciousness of a remarkably wide range of individuals as they face changes in their lives. For through George Eliot is most interested in the heroes of her two original stories, the idealist Dorothea and Lydgate, who have to learn through suffering to accept the frustration of their early aspirations. She frequently turns the spotlight on other characters, each of whom possesses an equivalent center of self, whence the lights and shadows must always fall with a certain difference. The book reads like a lesson, and especially for those who choose to or are conditioned to look at life and the world through this, fixed, biased perspective. Whereas I feel that society is so much more deeper than that. It is so much more deeper and over and above at the same time. The narration bit is very, very captivating, and every character's nature is discovered. Like you're slowly peeling the layers, and slowly with subtlety, but the pace at which that happens is decided by George Eliot. The layers are peeled down to the inner space of every character. So much wisdom, so much intelligence, so much judging between good and bad, and even questioning what really is good and what is bad, and how all of that can affect so many lives at the same time. It's a roller coaster ride reading this novel, and honestly speaking, that construction noise. And honestly speaking, I can't wait to read it all over again and even finish it this time. And the last one before I talk about manga is Seneca's On the Shortness of Life. Someone should actually write a separate book on the shortness of this book. I mean, look how tiny it is. Tiny yet so profound at the same time. It's just what we humans need to read to sort of, reset our heavy machinery, the brain. There is so much wisdom and philosophy jam-packed into this non-fiction read, so much clarity about life. It's almost impossible for me to not rewire my approach to life and my thinking after reading this book, or rather a collection of essays which explains why I've read it multiple times and will keep rereading it over and over again once every few months. It's actually quite a battered copy that I have, but that just adds more character to the book. Okay, so let me read to you one of my favorite excerpts from the book. Consider also the diseases which we have brought on ourselves, and the time too which has been unused. You will find that you have fewer years than you reckon. Call to mind when you ever had a fixed purpose, how few days have passed as you had planned, when you were ever at your own disposal, when your face wore its natural expression, when your mind was undisturbed. What work you have achieved in such a long life. How many have plundered your life when you were unaware of your losses. How much you have lost through groundless sorrow, foolish joy, greedy desire, the seductions of society. How little of your own was left to you. You will realize that you are dying prematurely. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. I have read this book over and over again, and I will keep reading this book over and over again for the rest of my life. Alright, now we move on to mangas, all the mangas that I want to read and that Aisha has already read. So we will start with Death Note. Yes. So these are volumes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 that I have. The story is about a young male student bored with the monotony of his existence who finds this book called Death Note, which was accidentally dropped on earth by a death god. So he uses the book to purge the world of evil, but things don't turn out to be as simple as that. The plot sounds very interesting, and since this will be my first manga, I am even more excited to read it. Okay, next we have Uzumaki by Junji Ito. Now my sister absolutely loved this book. She told me a lot about how this horror manga's storytelling spirals around really dark and grotesque elements. Now I said spirals because, as you can see, the bizarre, almost hypnotic spiral shape is the center around which the story's symbolism is built. It's supposed to represent all our fears, anxiety, dread, and just the monotony of life, as if it's going around in circles. Brilliant piece of art. I mean, just look at all the art. It's wonderful and quite unsettling at the same time. It's fascinating how all this stems from someone's imagination, unconfined imagination. Korozucho, a small fog-bound town on the coast of Japan, is cursed. According to Shuichi Saito, the withdrawn boyfriend of teenager Kiri Goshima, the town is haunted not by a person or being, but a pattern, Uzumaki. Right, so this is it's a hypnotic secret shape of the world, and a bizarre masterpiece of horror manga with spirals. The town is contaminated with spirals. Okay, now the third and last manga on my list is Attack on Titan. Again, I have not read this one, and in this case I have not watched the series either, but I think I'm going to read it first and then watch the series. I just prefer it that way. A lot of people have recommended this manga to me, and I only have the first volume of the book. For the past century, what's left of mankind has been hidden in a giant three-walled city, trapped in fear of the bizarre giant humanoids known as the Titans. Little is known about where they came from or why they are bent on consuming humankind, but the sudden appearance of an enormous Titan is about to change everything. I read a lot of reviews also about how complex and mysterious this manga is, and it's conceptualized with allegories about death, fear, and basically everything that's unknown or uncertain about human existence and suffering. That's about it then. Thank you so much for listening, for watching. This was a long video. I just hope that it was fun to watch. Please let me know what you think, what you're reading, either here on YouTube or on Instagram. I'll be recording more videos like these and a little more often also, simply because it was so much fun talking about so many books all at once. Thanks again. The year's drawing to a close, so I hope you all are doing great, and I'll see you in my next video.